Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventure Show with travel writer Debbie Stone. So welcome, everyone. You know, we get to chat with Debbie Stone. We affectionately call her the Fire Monkey, and we're going to talk about that a little later in the show. But she just came back from Morocco, and she has, what she said, a bunch of magical pinch me moments. And this is very exciting. She went on this amazing tour with Wilderness Travel, so check out wildernesstravel.com. But we have some big news today. You know, our Global Adventures with travel writer Debbie Stone podcast, as I said, is every fourth Tuesday. But we are changing a lot here on Big Blend Radio in that our podcast channels are each going to have their own digital magazine. So every time, starting now, when Debbie comes on Big Blend Radio with her Global Adventure Show, you're going to be able to click through and read her article that already has her podcast there in, guess what, Global Adventures magazine. It's a digital publication. You can click through the links, and every episode you'll be able to get the news story and the ones that you may have missed. Isn't this exciting? I'm excited, Debbie. Or how about you? Another pinch me moment. This is so cool. And to debut the magazine with, Morocco, when we talk about global adventures, this is like the perfect one to start it with, I think. Don't you?
I think so too. It was such an epic global adventure that I think it's a great one to begin with. I really do.
Oh man, this is so cool. And you did this as a guided adventure, and I think that's really cool. But this is a different kind of guided one in that it was the Morocco private journey, Imperial cities, the Great Sahara, and the Marrakesh. That's pretty epic. So this was private, and so very one-on-one.
And, it was really nice because, taking a private journey, everything is geared toward the client. And so it was geared toward myself and my husband who was with me. And we had, a wonderful guide who was with us the entire time and a wonderful driver who was with us the entire time. Both were named Hassan, which was pretty funny. But they were such wonderful gentlemen, and they just tended to our every needs. And, they were flexible and they were knowledgeable. And then for every city that we went to, we had private city guides that, were guides that were based there and knew their city, backwards and forwards. So we got, even more deeper in the depth of the knowledge of the particular destination. So it really was such a wonderful, thorough, it was just such a thorough exploration of this country with the cities that we went to and the places and the Sahara and the mountains and, from Marrakesh and Fez to Rabat and just so many different sites, so many different the history is so rich and colorful. The food is as well, and so is the landscape, which is so diverse. But everywhere I went, I felt like it was a pinch me moment. And for people who understand that, it's like pinch me. I can't believe I'm here. And it was like that in so many different places, So that's why it is the magical pinch me moments.
And everyone, again, this is Morocco with Wilderness Travel. The links are in the episode notes, and you can also go right to wildernesstravel.com and click on Morocco, the private tour that we were talking about, Morocco Private Journey. This is so epic. And I love that your two guys were Hassan, but at the same time, you also went to a very, historic landmark that is also a Hassan landmark, right? So we'll get to that in a little bit. But you went to Rabat. That was the first place, right, that you went to. And that's the country's capital and a UNESCO World Heritage City, which I think, no matter what people think about the UN, I think these UNESCO sites, I think it's one of their biggest programs ever. So
I think so too. Yeah. And I think they are significant. And so much of Morocco, UNESCO has gone in there and declared it a World Heritage City or World Heritage Site. But Rabat is interesting. It is the country's capital. It is known for having these incredible architectural gems. A lot of beautiful green spaces. The place is very pristine, has a lot of garden, museums, but their historical sites are there, and they blend really well with all of this modern urban planning that they've done there. And so it is, it is kind of an interesting city from the contrast. But like I said, it really blends well. One moment you're, looking at a very historical mosque or a historical Medina, a little area within a city that is the old city, they call it. And then the next moment you're looking at, very modern skyscrapers or architecture or modern theaters or whatever. So it's a very interesting contrast. So we did have our own city guide there who introduced us to a number of the landmarks there. The first one was really one of the most significant, which is the mausoleum of Muhammad the fifth. And he was the current king's grandfather. So he and his sons are buried there. And this monument is really jaw-dropping. It's beautiful. It's stunning, the mosaics, the carved plaster. And they make a point to tell you that it's not only a burial place, but it really is a place to honor this man who really was responsible for leading Morocco to independence. And this came in 1956. They were under French colonial rule up until then. So it really symbolizes the independence, the struggle, and the desire to have their own cultural identity.
Wow, wow. I mean, I just can only imagine, right? That is pinch me moments to me. And so when I talked about another historic site that had the name Hassan, so you went to the Hassan Tower there, right? That was another monument that, so that's amazing. Your guides are named that too.
It's a fairly common name there, but yes, the Hassan Tower is this a minaret. It was made out of sandstone, and it's another symbol there. But it really was the sole vestige or remnant of what was planned to be the largest mosque in the world. And this sultan named Al Mansur had desired and planned and wanted this to happen, but he died, and then those who came after him just either their lack of money or they just didn't have the will to finish it. So what you see is this tower, and then you see these posts around it. And so it does look like this kind of unfinished area. And when you first see it, you're kind of like, what is all this? What's happening here? Is this under construction? But no, it was at one point going to be something very, very large, but never got.
Wow. And then you went to Udaya Casbah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, I don't know how to pronounce this. I've not been there, but this is another UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Absolutely. And it's it's like an ancient fortress, and it is this beautiful, very stalwart, big building with this big entrance. But inside are all these beautiful alleyways, vivid blue, white alleyways, and there's gardens in there, and there's a museum of jewelry, and it has these beautiful vistas it's on the ocean and the river, so you get these lovely vistas there. Yeah, it's a place you could just kind of roam around for quite a while and just enjoy the sights. So we really did. We really enjoyed that.
So you also went to a Roman ruin, and we've got to, this is the thing about North Africa, right? It's like we were all connected at some point in this place, and this is before the earth split open and everything. But and just reminding everyone, the earth is round. Just kidding. But I always have to get that in there. But Roman ruins. So this is another layer of history that is part of Morocco.
Absolutely, and it was called
See, I left that for you.
Thank you. Yeah. And if I have massacring or torturing the word, then I apologize in advance. But it is Morocco's most important archaeological monument, but it is also UNESCO World Heritage as well. And it is fascinating, another pinch me moment here as well, because it's dating back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries. And at one time it was Rome's provincial capital in Morocco. So it was the last kind of the outpost of the Roman Empire there. And at one point it had 20,000 people. It was a place for the wealthy and for the retired military. And our guide, we also had a dedicated guide here. He said it was like a retirement community and said like the Florida of Morocco, which was kind of interesting. But only 50% of this place has been excavated. So you can imagine what is still there. And there's just amazing structures that are there. And there's mosaics that are incredible and inscriptions that are still there. And it just, I found it fascinating, and I wanted to be there, stay there a lot longer than we were. We had a very good guide, and it also was very, very hot, and there is really no shade there. So it is one of those things where, you want to see it, but, you're also trying to balance that with sunstroke, so to speak.
Now, that's the thing. The buildings, I wonder about that going into, I was watching a documentary the other day on some of the North African places and about the heat because of the buildings. Did you feel that heat while you were there?
Yeah, it sometimes radiates off the buildings, but when there is no shade there, and you're walking, on stones, and you're walking up, hills or whatever it is, it's just you have to pace yourself, and you definitely have to, protect yourself. I wore long sleeves and long pants and hat and lots of sunscreen, and that's what you need to do to be able to, enjoy yourself and not, come away with sunburn or sunstroke or whatever, but it was so amazing. I mean, to see these mosaics that are still there and that are still, you can still recognize the symbols in there, and these gods that were in there, and it's also a feat of Roman engineering, because they had this incredible underground heating system in their baths, and
That's right.
so it was just, so much is there, and it really, shows the Romans as, being, truly top engineers and builders.
Now, it's interesting because you talk about all of these, amazing buildings and everything like the baths of Galen. No, I'm not, Gallienus. I'm like, oh boy, I got myself. Well, you went to the house of Orpheus. I can say that. But
Yes,
this is also just all this architecture and architectural beauty, right? And I think now, as we're so modern and having housing developments that are modern and we all look the same, little houses on, on the hillside. When we go to a place like this, it's just jaw dropping. And then we remember the importance of craftsmanship, right? And just,
absolutely. The artisans, oh my God, the
artisans.
mosaics.
It's just like, wow, look what we did so long ago. And we didn't
Right,
even have,
right.
all these tools. We didn't have electricity back then,
It's amazing.
Did you want to go there partly because of this, or is it, we're going to continue on some of these historic cities. We're going to, go to Fez next. But before we get there, I want to ask, like, what was it for you to go to Morocco?
Morocco was always a country I'd wanted to visit for many years. I think there's something so captivating and something so exotic about this country. The pictures I would see, it just, I kept thinking to myself, I really, really want to go to Morocco. I want to go to North Africa. I wanted to see this kind of meld, in there, and of several different cultures, and the rich history, as I mentioned before, and it just an amazing what is there that's still standing there, that dates back so long. And the people and the food and everything else, it all kind of spoke to me, and I thought to myself, I hope I won't be disappointed or whatever. Well, there was no way I was ever going to be disappointed. It far exceeded my expectations.
Wow.
And that's why I kept saying, pinch me, pinch me, pinch me.
Well, I think there's like a romantic thing of it, and we'll get into movies later, but that's part of it, is like it's been on
Oh,
the screen,
sure.
and we all have that, like, oh, there's something romantic about it. I can't explain it. It's just, even though it's like this giant desert area, there's oases and there's mountains
Mountains,
and
yes.
yeah,
Yep,
Atlas
yep.
Mountains and everything. But I'm going to go back. I wonder if the Four Seasons was named after the Four Seasons there. The hotel. Like, I just
Yeah,
wonder.
I have no idea.
I'm just like, I was wondering about that because got to think about the ancient inns in North Africa, and the
Right.
Middle East. You think about the inns, even if you go back to Christmas time and the baby Jesus, there was an inn out there, so it's kind of interesting to me about back then. But now Fez, am I saying it right, or is it Fez
Yes,
or
it's
Fez?
Fez. Yeah, Fez. Yeah.
Okay. this is a big deal as, an imperial city.
It is. There are four
Oh,
imperial cities in Morocco, and Fez is the oldest. The others are Marrakesh, Meknes, and Rabat. And
okay.
Fez goes back to 769, I think, also a
Whoa.
UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's very popular with tourists because it is one of the most perfectly they have one of the most perfectly preserved medieval towns, a Medina, that goes back to the ninth century. And there's these domes and minarets everywhere, and it's just so colorful and so spectacular. And our guide there was incredibly knowledgeable. He'd grown up there in the Medina. There are nearly
Wow.
10,000 alleyways, which, can you imagine, finding your way along 10,000 alleyways? And it's like this rabbit warren.
How
It's
does
just
GPS work there?
oh, God knows, but it's over 500 acres. There are over 40,000 people that are permanent residents that are in this Medina. And so it is the largest pedestrian only area in the country. And so there are souks, which are the market stalls, little shops. And there are cafes and the courtyards and hammams, which are the baths. And there are gardens and schools and a mosque and museums and houses. And I mean, you can imagine, I mean, it's like it's one city within a city. And it's, these narrow passages. So people are traveling back and forth on these passages. And also, since there are no cars, they use donkeys to do all their transportation in terms of, taking their goods and even taking their garbage out on donkeys. And so, you're sharing these pathways with donkeys and people, and it's
That's
pretty
cool.
mind blowing. It is unbelievable. And as a photographer, there's opportunities. As I said, my head was on a swivel. It was just incredible. You see these mounds of figs and spices, and you see these, textiles and everything just hanging and displaying everywhere that you go. It's quite remarkable.
And they love color.
Absolutely.
To also touch back on some travel tips here because, we go in, as Americans or from wherever we are in the world, go in there. Any tips beyond the heat, right? In regards to photography, ask permission, that kind of thing. I know it's very Muslim there. Maybe you won't get your wine at night. I don't know. Like anything people should know on how to behave in Morocco
Well, I think
to respect
as
the
in any
culture. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, as in any country, you respect the cultures, and you have to, you make sure you research the norms. But wilderness travel sent a very, detailed, pre-trip planning and mentioned all of these things. But basically, of course, if you're going to take pictures of people, you should ask permission. That's, I think, a very decent thing to do, unless it's like a big crowded scene, for example, or big passageways and things like that. But individuals, and then in terms of being respectful, because it is a Muslim country, many of the women do cover their heads, and if you go into a religious area or site. Now, it's very clear. I need to make it very clear. There's only one mosque in Morocco that tourists are allowed to go inside, because typically, if you're not Muslim, you're not allowed into a mosque, and that mosque is the big one in Casablanca. But otherwise, you can see from the outside, the exterior, but you're not allowed to go in. But I never, I always respected the norms. Like I said, I wore long pants, and I covered up, even though we saw, some Moroccan women walking around, without head coverings, and they were wearing skirts, or they were wearing, and short sleeves, and so it's not like it's this firm and hard rule that you do. But I think that, respectfully speaking, I think it's people need to be aware of that, and just, I think, just trying to be as respectful and patient as possible, and that goes with travel everywhere.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I think people should just understand before they go there and get it clear so we do the right thing and read books on it, and things like that too. So you were talking about that because you said within the Medina in Fez that you saw the Quechua Mosque.
Ketrain Mosque, and we saw it from the exterior.
No,
And
yeah, but that was
no, it's a pretty. I mean, it's a very well known mosque in the Medina. And then we also saw the world's oldest university, that is considered the world's oldest university. But we also saw a school, Madersa is what they call a school, the Adarine Madersa, which had we could go in. It was magnificent mosaics. That's what it's known for. And then there was a museum of Moroccan art that also had all these examples
oh.
of tile work and pottery and wood carving. To me, I'm always interested in the artisans and the crafts. And in Morocco, the traditions they try to keep alive for these trades and these artisans. And so we visited a number of places, like a ceramics place, an embroidery cooperative, a weaving studio. Then we visited a tannery, silversmiths, a copper brass shop, and we got to watch these artisans at work. And it really was, to me, that was another one of these wonderful highlights there. The tannery, I had never been to a tannery, and this Chora tannery is quite the sight. It's dates back to the 11th century, and it is quite the operation. And you see people, and they're doing these ancient methods by hand, to process and to naturally dye the leather. And it's this extensive undertaking. And we got to watch this. It's quite an eye opener. Like I said, I've never been to a tannery, and you're warned ahead of time as you walk in that there are strong odors. And they immediately give you these fresh mint sprigs so that you can smell them during the
Oh,
tour.
it's just you're smelling salts.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. So
amazing.
mine stayed close to my nose. I can tell you that. So,
I
but
bet. I
it
bet.
was a fascinating place. I mean, the Fez was it's just unbelievable, and it really, you think to yourself, oh my gosh, this is Morocco. This is things I've seen or pictures, and it just is to me amazing, an amazing place.
Well, the mint, the mint tea, that is something I want to go there for that
Yes.
specifically. Oh,
Definitely. Every go, you get tea. I mean, it is a traditional drink. It is really central to life there, and preparing it and serving it is an art. It's all about hospitality and friendship. And if you visit somebody's house, or you go into a hotel to check in, or a guest house, you're going to get tea. And it's made with the gunpowder green tea, as we were told, and mint leaves and
mm.
sugar, although you can have it without sugar, but it's poured from up high. So they want to create a layer of foam, or what they call a frothy top on the tea.
Oh,
That's important. And I loved the ritual. I loved the tea, and I drank quite a lot of it throughout the trip. It just felt so, I don't know, it was soothing at times, but it also could be invigorating. It does have caffeine. I just loved the whole ritual of it. It was
but
delightful, delightful, delightful.
I'm a huge, huge fan of it. I mean, I haven't had it in Morocco, which would be different, but I'm a huge fan of Moroccan tea and green tea because it's green and mint, right? It's mixed
Right.
together. And mint and all of that is so good. It's good for your skin. Even put your feet in it. It's really good. You've been
Absolutely.
hiking
Mint
all day
leaves.
long. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know that. You're a hiker. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Put your feet in a bath of mint tea and put some green tea in there too, because of the caffeine. It will fix your feet. It's so good. So I think, these ancient cultures know something. How did you do on the food? Because I know you're pescatarian, and so I was wondering about how is Debbie going to eat with all this running around to all these UNESCO World Heritage sites and going to the desert, riding camels, which we'll get to next, but I want to know how you did on the food.
I did pretty good. You can eat a lot of vegetables there. I did have some chicken. One of their one of the biggest couscous. Everybody knows what
Oh,
couscous
yeah.
is, but couscous is a very big dish there, and they make it, and then they put different things on top of it, and they have all these cooked vegetables that go on top. They make tagines, is what they're called, and if you maybe have thought of seeing like a conical earthenware dish, and that's what the cooking pot is, and it simmers the meats or whatever you're putting in there. And also they do like brochettes, like a shish kebab type of thing, and they do something called chicken pastillas, which is wrapped in like phyllo dough, and it actually has like ginger, cinnamon, almonds. It's very good. And then they have many different Moroccan type of salads and baked breads. They're big on the bread, and desserts. They have a lot of sticky sweets and flan, and so there's a lot of choices. The one thing also that people need to know is, as in a number of countries, particularly in Africa, but you don't drink tap water. You don't order drinks with ice. You drink bottled water. You brush your teeth with bottled water. So, those kinds of things are important to know. Also, we were told, you don't eat the fresh fruit because you don't know if it's been what kind of water it's been washed in. You can eat
Oh, yeah.
bananas. Yeah, you can eat bananas, and some, if you want, like if it's been peeled or whatever. But the problem is you don't know if anything's been washed and what type of water it's been washed in. So,
And especially being new to an area, your body's not assimilated
yes,
to it.
yeah. And so, you don't sit down and have a big fresh salad
Salad.
of fresh vegetables, raw vegetables. No, you have a lot of cooked vegetables, and a lot of the Moroccan salads are cooked vegetables. So, you've cooked carrots, and so that, those kinds of things are fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, this all sounds like Africa, but then I'm like, yeah, it
Yep,
is Africa.
it is.
I
It
don't think
absolutely is.
it's Africa, but the tangines,
Absolutely is.
like that whole, the tangines,
Yep.
I don't know. It's just, there's a caramelization that they managed to do in those that is, I don't know how to explain it. And maybe I'm going East Africa though with it, but it's different. So it's a different
Yeah.
culture. So I
It's a
shouldn't
little
say
bit
that, but it's a little bit different. Yeah. That's East African, a lot further, south, but they kind of did that similar thing. And a lot of Muslim cultures there too, well, Muslim, it's mixed. It's just a different part of the country, or continent, I should say. But the food was so good. And the couscous, I'm betting, is different than what we get out of a box here and make
Oh
ourselves.
my gosh. The couscous is an art there, and it's our guide Hassan said, "Oh my gosh, my mom makes the best couscous, and whenever I go home, where he's from the Atlas Mountains, whenever I go home, she makes the couscous, and it's so wonderful." And I said, "Oh well, what is she doing?" He goes, "Oh, she just, it's just she has her own way of doing it, and it just tastes so good, and it's just." And the couscous does taste totally different than what you would get in a box. It just is. And there's a whole, preparation with it, and then the steaming and the whole thing with the vegetables. But and it's funny when they do the tagine, and they open the cooking pot, so they take off that top. It's kind of like a presentation. So
Oh,
it's fun. It's fun. It's like,
it's like, ta-da.
ta-da,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Isn't that cool? Like, it's like, hey, I
Yeah.
made this, and it's like
Yep.
specialty.
Yes.
And the same thing, like you're saying with tea, that's something like you were talking about in your article. Everyone linked in the episode notes in the new Global Adventures magazine here. You check that out because you talk about that even if you go to someone's house or go somewhere, the tea is customary. You don't go in really without someone going, okay, we're making tea, right? It,
Absolutely.
they may be better than the British at this.
I enjoy that. I enjoy green tea a lot, but they call it Moroccan whiskey, which is pretty funny. But this is Islamic country, so
Yeah,
technically,
no.
but as a visitor, as a tourist, if you're staying in a hotel or whatever it is, I guess you you have access to, if you want alcoholic beverages, they have them there, so it's not like you will be denied any.
You're going to have a mini. I interviewed a gentleman on the history of wine, and he
Oh.
was in Jordan, and he wrote a book on the true history of wine, and Jordan was it. He's a journalist, science journalist, as
Mm-hmm.
I recall, and he was in Jordan, and he had one of those days, and he just looked at the mini fridges like, I'm going in, and he found some of the best wine he has ever had, and it led him on that journey to find the history of wine, and he
Isn't
did.
it funny?
And
Oh my
North
gosh.
Africa and the Middle East, yes, has the oldest vineyards in the world. and some of the best wine, and
Isn't it
Michelangelo did too.
interesting?
Yeah, it's very interesting. But
Oh,
that's
how
where it
funny.
started for him. Jordan's not that far from Morocco, as I recall on the map, but I don't know. I think everything's nearby. But this is so cool to hear about this. Now, I want to go to the Sahara because the
Uh,
Sahara, you have done
mm,
some of the most epic deserts in our country. You went to Southern Africa. You've done so many deserts. Think
yeah.
about it. Even in this country, right? The Great
Oh,
Sand
yeah,
Dunes, the
definitely.
Sahara. I mean,
Oh,
you live in
God.
Santa Fe,
Yeah.
which is a desert, high desert. So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely. I
how
know
does
deserts.
the Sahara though
It's
is
the
pretty
Sahara
epic?
is it takes
The
the cake,
mama,
believe me. It's
the
a
mama.
grandmama. We stayed at a private desert camp,
Oh,
and we glamped. It was this wonderful luxury tent that had all the amenities. Our own private bathroom in this tent was
wow.
had a lot of bright fabrics and colorful Moroccan carp rugs. As I say in my story, I felt like I was in a sheik's retreat. Unbelievable. And you are right. You are in the Sahara, and the Sahara is this amazing landscape that I kept pinching myself to believe that I was there. It is the largest desert in the world, and it fills nearly all of North Africa, and it's in at least part of 10 countries, including Morocco. And it's so vast, and when you're there, it's so still. It is unbelievable. It's just the most gorgeous landscape, and the sunsets and the sunrises in this place with the orange and the red hues on these sand dunes are just you just can't imagine. They're just so jaw dropping and awe inspiring and everything you can possibly think of to describe them and more. And of course there are camels, and one of the top experiences to do a camel ride, and we did one to take in the sunset. So my husband and I each had a camel, and there was a man who was kind of leading the camels, and we just went up and down these sand dunes until we went to the kind of the top of the sand dune, and then stopped and got off and watched the sunset, which was just magnificent. And I
Oh.
say in my article, the camels in Morocco are dromedaries, so they have one hump as opposed to two. And so if you've never been on
It's
one, to
not
get on it,
Alice.
you get on the camel as it's laying down. And as the camel rises up, you have to lean back. And then as soon as you're going downhill, you have to lean back as well. But then on the uphill, you lean forward. And so it's not the most, as I said, it's not the most comfortable ride because the gait is very irregular. But you get used to it because you kind of sway with the animal's movements. And not only that, I didn't really care because I was so enamored with the landscape around me that it really, I wasn't really thinking about my comfort. It's not like riding a horse.
It's weird. It's like getting on a horse and a saddle, like a Western versus a English saddle. It's two different things if you're used to one. You know what I mean? It's kind of a different feel. It's
Yeah,
really
and it's,
different.
I mean, the horse doesn't lay down for you when you get on. You get on a horse when it's standing up, whereas a camel, you have to get on when
Mm.
it's laying down. You can't reach it, kind of thing. So, you get down and you get onto it, and then it kind of rises up, and it's, you really have to lean back because otherwise, you're going to be, you're thrown forward kind of thing. And so you just hang on, and they usually know what they're doing. They just kind of follow, and that's about it. My camel though was pretty funny. It was a little feisty at first, and it started to
Got a
nip at
fire monkey on
my
the back.
husband's camel.
No, but that's the fire monkey camel.
That is,
She's
gosh, it is. And every time I get on any kind of riding animal, a horse or whatever it is, like I always get the creature that acts up. It's like
still
no.
ask you this because I want to make sure, like, there's when you go to countries and stuff, there's the camel is a way of transport, right? And so I want people to understand there's a difference about them being a gimmick kind of thing. And I know you are very, very much a responsible traveler who really focuses on sustainability and things like that. So in regards to riding the camels, these are well cared for animals and part of the culture. This is not like we're, swimming with dolphins for fun. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
different.
No,
This is
the
different,
camels, I
right?
mean, they're a traditional creature there, and they are, well respected. And
It's
they've
the
been around
horse.
for
They're the
quite
horse.
some time. Yes, they are transportation. I mean, it's in the desert. That is the way that people have gotten around for umpteen years and centuries. It's been camels, and this is the particular one humped camel. Now I've been in Egypt, and those camels, there are two humps, so it was interesting. They look a little different, and it's a little bit of a different experience, but it just is something. I don't know. I felt like the whole desert was just a very magical experience. And then we dined outside under the stars.
Oh
This
my
group
gosh. I was
group
going to
of
ask you about the
musicians.
star.
My gosh. And we had this group of musicians that came. They're called, I think, Ganawa musicians, and they had a lot of the traditional instruments, these traditional castanets and these lutes and these drums, and they sang and performed, and they danced at one point and asked us to join them. And it was really wonderful, but it was so special to be under the stars, have this music in this incredible place. I think that is truly something that's imprinted in my mind and my soul. It's just was such an experience.
The stars had to be incredible out there.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's no pollution, there's no competition with other lights. You know what I mean? It's you're there, and it's truly, you really feel the vastness of this place and the quiet, you know?
I love this. Now to go to a completely different landscape. I mean, they really gave you a tour. I mean, this is
Oh, it
like,
was a fabulous
I
tour.
can't
Yes,
even,
really.
I can't, I mean, this is insane. I mean, you went from the city life, the Medinas and the architecture and these UNESCO World Heritage Sites out into the Sahara Desert, the biggest desert in the world. You rode camels, you stayed out under the stars, listened to the music, you've been eating their food and drinking their tea. And then you go into the mountains a little bit, right? You went into canyon country.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, all the
Yes.
same company.
And I do want to put in a wonderful plug for this company. This was the first time I traveled with them, and they were just wonderful. Their attention to detail is incredible in organization. They're just, making sure that everything is going well and smoothly. They take care of everything from the beginning to the end, from your booking and all that to the tour, and then after the tour, when they want you to let them know how things went, but everything, and even the accommodations, the restaurants, everything, the sites, everything was just so well planned and so well executed as well. But yes, the mountains are in Morocco. You go from the coast and then the desert, and then you've got the lower and the middle and the higher Atlas Mountains. And um, in the Middle Atlas Mountains, which is very interesting, there are the famed Barbary apes, or really they're called the macaques, monkeys.
Hmm.
And they're talus, and so you know them. They're talus, and they like the cedar forests, and they live wild, and they're in colonies, and they're an endangered species, but they are listed as protected in Morocco. And they will come and see you because some of them are very accustomed to getting fed by travelers that go over this route. I prefer not to feed them, only because these are wild creatures. They can get up pretty close and personal to you, and they do have teeth. And so, it's very interesting to see them and to know that they are an interesting creature, and they are one of the known creatures in Morocco. So it was very interesting to see them. But the canyon country was really another highlight. They have these beautiful gorges. The Todra and the Dades gorges are these there are two different types of gorges, but one is, the Todra is very like tall, steep walls that are narrow and they're squeezing together. And then, the other one is the other one is more, the Dades are in the high Atlas, and there's more open. And I felt like I was a little bit at home because these are these red cliffs. They're home to Berber villages. They look like it. This landscape looks like the American Southwest, which I live.
Yeah.
And you can imagine. I felt like, "Oh, I know this landscape."
That's amazing to
And
me that you find that connection, you know?
yes, yeah, it's just, I mean, the landscape was very familiar, and there was these very interesting rock formations that they call monkey fingers because they
I see.
really
I've been
look like
waiting for you to say
that.
this week.
Yes.
This is our double fire monkey moment here on the show. I
Right,
mean,
right.
first, I'm just letting you go with this, so you get to say it and call it out. But monkey fingers got me. I was like, all right, she already had the actual monkeys, right? And then, which kind of remind me of baboons, but now you've actually got monkey fingers. So this is a place you were destined to go. Just saying. Anyway, tell everybody about the monkey fingers. Sorry.
They're just these very, very, very tall, ginormous stone columns. They have these, they look like ginormous hands with fingers. They call them the monkey fingers. Yeah, they're very well known there. It's a well known formation there. But anyway, it is the monkey connection.
No, sorry. We managed to find one just about on every episode. Just saying. But where was it that the monk gave you the nickname?
Yeah, it was in Bhutan.
That's right. I just had to make sure.
Yeah.
See, how many countries have you been to now?
I
Just
don't
thinking
know,
about
but inching up to 100. That's all I can say.
so fantastic, isn't it? Don't you feel
it's
good that you're
wonderful.
doing it?
Fabulous. And I still have so much more to explore.
No, she's like, I just feel like you keep amping it up every year. Like, I'm like, how are you doing this? But, people ask us that. We travel full time, but it's like,
yes,
you're doing it. You're like going out into all of these different cultures and immersing yourself. That's what I love about this one so much is that the cultural immersion that you're doing with this. And I think we've talked about this pretty much every show you've been on about having guides, like walking tours and all of that. But this is true guide immersion. And the guides, when you're sitting there and driving through the desert or through the city, you are hearing local life from them. They are your local. They are. And they should be paid for it. They should have all this, recognition because they are promoting businesses that they know and they know to work with. Because let me tell you, I know a lot of tour guides. They're family to me, and anybody in the hospitality industry, bed and breakfast, hotels, they're not going to recommend someone that they think sucks. I'm just saying it straight up. These people are the ones that they're going to recommend you that are serious about what they do, that are professional, that show up on time and do that. It's like you're going to plan a wedding. Ask the hotel who they recommend, because I'm going to tell you, the hotel knows that you're having your wedding in, who shows up and who doesn't. It's the truth.
And this company, Wilderness Travel, they are known for, they've been award winning. They get so many accolades. And they have some of the top guides in the business, and these people are very passionate. Not only that, they want to share their love and their knowledge of the destination, of the people, of the culture, the history, et cetera. And so, you get a very, very, very enriched experience. But in terms of that wonderful Southwest landscape, I thought when I was there, I was like, I can imagine a Western being filmed here. The segue to this is yes, the country has earned a reputation for having a wide variety of movie set locations, and because of its, like I said, the landscape versatility. So they have had a lot of productions that have been filmed there, and there's actually what's called a Moroccan Hollywood, or what they call Mollywood, is what they is known as.
Wow.
But there is like a town there. I think it's Ozerzate, but it is the center of the film industry there, and they have a place called the Atlas Film Studio, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest studio there. But and so they do have, the studios will recreate, of course, ancient villages, but the real thing can be found at a place called It's called Eight Ben Haddou. I think it's Ben Haddou. And it's a historic fortified village. They call it a Kassar, and it's on the road of 1,000 Kasbahs. And it's between the Sahara and Marrakesh. And it's a historical route that was taken by caravans that went from Morocco to Sudan and Mali. But at 8 Ben Haddou, you'll see this complex of buildings, which is also UNESCO. And they're all earthen clay. And it's on this hillside and has had an ideal defensive position. You walk up these, stairs, these switchbacks, these ramps, and all along the way are these little shops and cafes, and you get to the top and you get this incredible vista of the surrounding scenery. But Hollywood has been using that site as a film location since the 1960s. So, they wanted authentic backdrops. So movies like The Man Who Would Be King, Marco Polo, The Jewel of the Nile, The Mummy, Gladiator, Babel, Game of Thrones. I mean, lots of shows have used this particular site, and you can imagine, that you see it and you're like, yeah, this is really authentic. It's not some contrived set.
I think about that because where you are in Santa Fe and New Mexico is like, I started to try and do like the film trails of New Mexico. That would take,
Yeah,
it's like trying to do the blues trail of Mississippi. Like that's
right.
a whole year, so, but this area, this whole Morocco, Egypt, all of this has been used for many years. And, I want to go to the, so, I'm going to move to that because Marrakesh, I mean, everyone knows Marrakesh, right? But what was that like? Because it's a little different than where you started, right? It was different. I know
Absolutely.
it's another UNESCO heritage site, right?
Absolutely, and it's known as the Red City because they have these rose-hued buildings, and um, it has Berber origins, which is very interesting. Two-thirds of the Moroccans are actually Berbers. They call them Imazagian. I can't pronounce it, but that's what they call themselves. And so the big place in Marrakesh is the Medina. It's 11th century, and they have this main square, which has a host of a lot of colorful performers. Like, there's snake charmers and dancers and monkeys and musicians and all sorts of other characters. It's kind of one of those places that is, I think, more for tourists who want to take photos, and of course you do need to pay them. I think
Okay.
there's a certain amount of element there that unless you're really interested in getting photos of these kinds of
Going to
these
Cairo?
characters.
Is it
Yeah.
like Cairo in that way? In that
Um,
way or no?
no, I think it's a little different. And in any case, it's at night it gets more busy and a little bit more crazy. But I think the Medina itself is this, once again, another rabbit warren, a labyrinth. It has all these souks. They sell everything. And I said, everything you think you might need and things you didn't even know you wanted. And so, it's the merchandise is unbelievable. It's overwhelming. It's dazzling. It's crazy. And so, you can walk through there, which we did many times, back and forth and in and around. But our guide there, our city guide there, took us to, they're known for a few gardens. One was the Majorelle Garden, which is this beautiful, beautiful tropical desert garden, originally designed by Jacques Majorelle, and he was a painter. And he started in 1923, and he spent the next 40 years trying to create this botanical oasis. And they feature specimens he got from 5 different continents. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And after he passed away, it kind of it just kind of deteriorated until, believe it or not, in 1980, Yves Saint Laurent and his friend Pierre Berger bought the garden to save it. And they loved it, and they restored it, and so it would continue operation as a public garden. And there's a couple of museums in there. One is of Islamic art, another is of the Berber culture, of personal collections of both the artist and his friend. So it's a fascinating place. Fascinating.
Love this. I mean, I love that there's so many historic buildings, museums, and gardens all connected together
Yes,
because the
absolutely.
history of plants is connected to the history of people, and we forget that. And when you think about even going back to the tea is a plant, and that is
Oh,
a historic,
absolutely.
it's historic for this culture, as is the
Yes.
mint and what grows. And even knowing when we lived in the Joshua Tree area, we grew
Yeah.
mint, and that mint grew, like it grew,
Oh,
grew.
absolutely.
And people were like, you can't grow things in the desert. We're like, oh, yes, we can. Watch this. And we know a wonderful chef, Kitty Morse, who she lived and grew up in Morocco, and she's in San Diego area now, and written many award-winning cookbooks who just really showcases the French Moroccan cuisine, but also the biblical cuisine, because pomegranates and things like that are part of the food. I mean, this is biblical food that you're eating in ancient times is what I mean. And
Fascinating.
it's so cool to hear about your side of going to Marrakesh and the gardens, because that's what she talks about in her cookbooks. And, and again, that's romantic too, isn't the garden? I think that's part of the romanticism, not just the Sahara Desert, which is epic and amazing, but the gardens too, these
Oh,
oases in the middle of the desert, that's a romanticism too.
of course. And there's even another garden. They call it the Secret Garden, and it's another botanical sanctuary there in the city. And it's, there's two types of gardens. There's an exotic garden, which has plants from all over the world as well. And then there's the Islamic garden, which is basically plants that are found in Morocco. And what was interesting that our guide pointed out was this water system, this ancient water system that was an underground irrigation network, and definitely another marvel of engineering. But it took the water from the Atlas Mountains and transported it straight into, at the time, the city's palaces and gardens. And, it's important, a lot of the plants, for example, the agaves and the aloes, are chosen for their resistance to drought. And, a very important thing, especially when you're in that type of climate. But this underground network was fascinating to learn about as well. But there were so many other, so many wonderful sites. There was another madrasa there that was fascinating. It was once the largest school in North Africa. It was called the Ben Youssef's Madrasa, an architectural treasure. It was, used as really like a knowledge center where students and teachers could come, and scholars, and a beautiful, beautiful building with a beautiful courtyard. But it's interesting, upstairs around are these like dorm rooms where all the students were. Believe me, you walk into one and you're like, oh my God, this is the size of a closet. It is so claustrophobic.
Oh,
And it was meant to be very modest, very functional. And our guide said that the spaces were made to, quote, evoke the humility of the apprentice scholars, unquote. So, they were really, really tiny. Most of them had no windows. But it's interesting to see this beautiful courtyard and all this beautiful mosaics and things. And then you go upstairs and you're like, look, the dorm rooms. You're like, oh my gosh. And I thought to myself, well, it certainly was worse than the college dorms I was in, but I do remember my dorm rooms in college.
I know, right? It's so different. When you think about, oh, well, that's also when you go to Europe and you go stay in hotels or historic hotels in
Yeah.
Europe and even San Francisco.
Or in New York City. Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're going to learn. You're going to learn how people lived over and man. Now, okay. Now tell me about the Saudian
The
tombs.
Entombed, yes.
Saudian tombs.
Yes, a royal necropolis. It was, it was built back in the 16th, 18th century, and then it was sealed off, and it was intentionally hidden for over like 200 years and only rediscovered in 1917. But it was created by a sultan who was known as the Golden King, and it was this very lavish tomb complex with marble and plasterwork and gold. And, of course, his final resting place and that of his sons is the most luxurious. And then there are other tombs nearby, and you see the different classes of people with the alpha princes, and then the favored members of the court, and then the mother, and then outside in the garden plot are more like the other royal household members. But the interesting thing here is he died in splendor in 1603, and several decades later, another sultan, he decided to close up these tombs because, quote, he wanted to keep his predecessors out of sight and mind.
Oh
So
my
they were
God.
intentionally closed up
Oh my
for
God.
all those years. Isn't that pretty funny?
I think that's really, really funny. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
I don't want to see them.
Okay.
I don't want to know them. It was like, close them off.
But at least I'm going to still allow them to be there. But isn't
Exactly.
that where power happens, right? That power
Well,
thing.
people,
Yeah.
it was like, I don't want I don't want my predecessors to be a part of this. I want people to think of me and me alone, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Wow.
was interesting.
Well,
I was going to talk a little bit about the accommodations.
I was going to ask you about that because people
They
need to
are
know.
They
Yeah.
were wonderful, wonderful. The ones that the Wilderness Travel selected were incredible. They were each unique. We stayed in some historic riads, and a riad was a former private home. We stayed in a guest house, and we stayed in a hotel, and each was so beautifully decorated, traditional decor. Some of them had these private terraces, these gardens, these courtyards with swimming pools and hammams, baths, and everything was beautifully done. Staff was very attentive, and everyone made us feel very, very welcome. It was a lovely experience, and so nice to have such a selection of accommodations to really see, the different types of accommodations there.
Well, I love it. And everyone, again, the link is in the episode notes so you can read the story in the brand new Global Adventures with travel writer Debbie Stone digital magazine. You can also see it on our new Substack account for Way Back When History, because this is definitely an adventure for a historian. If you're into history or a history lover, I would say this would be an adventure, wouldn't you say, Debbie, for someone going out that loves history? This is
I think it's wonderful for historians. It's wonderful for people who really enjoy kind of immersing themselves or engrossing themselves within different cultures. I'd say it's for somebody who is a nature lover who loves the landscape. And, the diversity, like I said, of the landscape is pretty amazing. But, I think every type of traveler, there's something there for them.
Yeah, I'll go just for the tea, and the camels, and then the sand dunes. Okay, wait, I'm just going to go for the whole thing. Well, thank you so much. Fire Monkey, it is always fun having you on the show, and we can't wait for next month. Where are we going?
We are going to Sicily. We're going to Sicily, to the city of Catania.
Very cool. We can't wait. We can't wait. I mean, you're always going somewhere. There's never-ending adventures with the Global Adventures with Debbie Stone. Thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned. We've got more coming next month. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventures show with travel writer Debbie Stone. Debbie is here every fourth Tuesday. You can keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.